Welcome to the first documentary in our CineNoche series, Mujeres en la Lucha. Today, I have the pleasure to have with us Claudia Sparrow, the director of Maxima. Welcome, Claudia.
Thank you so much, Florencia, and thank you to you and Cine Las Americas for hosting a screening of Maxima. We're very, very honored to be part of this program.
Great. So let's get started. How did you find out about the story of Maxima, and who was your entry point, the person that you contacted to get started?
Yes, so back in 2016, when Maxima had just won the Goldman Environmental Prize, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's the equivalent to the Nobel Peace Prize for activists. So there was an article that came up online on the magazine La Etiqueta Negra, and I just came across it online, to be honest, and I had never heard about Maxima Acuña. I had no idea that she was going through that fight of the amazing work that she had been doing, and it really just like moved me to the core, to the point where I couldn't sleep thinking of Maxima, because I'm Peruvian. I have been in the US for many years, but I was just shocked again that I didn't know that a Peruvian citizen was standing all this abuse at the hands of an international corporation. I always thought that international corporations in Peru were probably following a very high standard of operations. So that was, I guess it was very naive of me to believe that was always the case. But unfortunately, it isn't. And I was just, again, so shocked that was happening for so long. And obviously, Maxima is not the only case, but in this particular scenario, I was just completely taken by her story, how her courage, and also just upset by the injustice of it. And so, being a filmmaker, I decided to reach out to the journalist of that piece, and he is the one who put me in touch first with Maxima's lawyer, Mirta Vázquez, and that's how it all started. But it was a process. It was not immediate. It was like a months long, like probably around 6 months, until like I finally was had like direct contact with Maxima.
Okay,
and
great.
and sorry, I have to add, understandably so also, because specifically at the time there were a lot of people trying to approach Maxima, obviously not always with the best of intentions. So there was Mirta, her lawyer, had to obviously do make sure that she was filtering who to give access to, obviously to Maxima and her family.
Yeah, rightfully so. We see that in the documentary, actually. You show how harassing journalists would come to them. And so I understand that you had to be screened, I guess.
Right, exactly. That's the word I was looking for. She had to obviously do the screening process, because they mentioned that there were instances where people were coming, offering their support, and in the end it was just people who were being filtered from different organizations to just kind of get a sense of what was going on, and not necessarily to help the way they had originally offered, per se.
Yeah. And can you tell us how Maxima is doing now, how they did during COVID? I don't know how much in touch you've been with her.
Yeah, no, actually, I'm glad you asked. I talked to her last week. I make a point to keep up with them, to check with them every few months. And the positive thing about COVID, even though it was incredibly difficult in Peru, because they actually had to go through like a shutdown, like basically nobody was able to like leave their house, only certain days a week for certain times to do groceries. So that's where Maxima's lifestyle really proved how, in a way, that's what we're supposed to be living, because she was not locked down, obviously. Like she lives out there on the farm, and she was able to live off her land, during those times where food was scarce, water was scarce, and people just didn't have the freedom to move around. So on that end, actually, it was a positive period of time for her and her family, because the operations also, being under national lockdown, operations where everybody, was forced to like either not work or work only fewer hours. So that was also the case for the mines. So they were able to enjoy some sense of peace, and which was really positive for them. On the downside, of course, all the prices went up. So whenever they did need to go and get anything, everything was more expensive. But overall, it was a positive period, and they managed to stay healthy. And now they are also, even though the harassment continues, it is not as bad as it used to be. So they are able to farm more, and move around more. Unfortunately, it is still always, they still have the civil lawsuit hanging over them, and it's like an everyday stress still, unfortunately, because it's something that they have to deal with still.
Yeah. And has Yanacocha continue with their harassment to the property and to them, because we see a lot of that in the film, and we see that it keeps coming back. It doesn't seem to stop.
Yes. So unfortunately, the family tells me that Maxima, like they cannot leave the property alone at any time, because they will find that there are some crop destructions, or that, some of their animal has, suspiciously been attacked or stolen. So they, again, even though they claim the episodes are not as often or perhaps as intense as before, that it is still there to the point where they cannot leave the property alone. So it's so that limits them, because always before it was Maxima and Jaime, her husband, who could go out and do work or anything that they needed to go do together, but now it always has to be only one. Somebody always has to be on the land.
Yeah, must be so stressful for them.
Exactly, it is at this point, it's more like psychological stress, right? That constant feeling of being persecuted, like, really at the end of the day, like chased and being, followed. So it is, unfortunately, that's something that they've learned to live with.
Yeah. And do you know if there's been progress at the end of the documentary? You tell us that Earth Rights International had won the appeal in 2019 against what is the company name? Newmont.
Newmont.
Yeah.
Yes, unfortunately, when they went back to the lower courts, they again, the judge ruled in favor of the company twice. I know it's incredibly disappointing. Ultimately, though, it's not on. Interestingly enough, is not on the base of lack of proofs per se, but it's just like legislation that, in this case and in many cases, still protects transnational corporations, because ultimately law says any disagreements have to be dealt with in basically the country where the operations are happening. And this is the case for that. So these are like loopholes that really, really, really harm Maxima and the many, many vulnerable communities around the world where we have these transnational corporations operating, because, even though, again, it's not that the judge, his ruling was not because there was lack of evidence, it was because, he argued like this case has to be dealt with in Peru. So that was the end of it, unfortunately.
No, that's so bad. And that was actually, it segues well into my next question, which is, do you think the Peruvian government will impose ever more strict rules for the extraction of the gold that Yanacocha is doing? We know that they've been very favorable toward them, and but it's a sustainability issue. And I know they're not going to stop, but is there a glimmer of hope that something could be done?
It's very tricky, and this really breaks my heart because the approach for mining in Peru is that, you know, we depend on mining, we need on mining to survive. There is this I mean, almost propaganda of, you know, this is mining sustains our economy, like we really need this business. But what nobody's taking into account is the cost of mining, and what you just mentioned, this is not going to last forever. Like, nobody's talking about that. So people are sold on the idea like, oh, no, we need to support mining, you know, it's like what keeps our economy going, and this and that, and that is not the case. Unfortunately, Peru's government, I don't know if you follow the news necessarily, but it's incredibly corrupt. It's going through crisis after crisis after crisis, political crises. And at the end of the day, you know, the people in power, unfortunately, are not prioritizing the environment, are not prioritizing human rights. So I am hopeful. I think that if it, like, you know, sometimes I feel this has to happen for real change to happen. Sometimes we really have to hit rock bottom for real change to happen. So I think that at one point, I hope that that's going to happen. As of right now, I just don't see like any clear political candidate that has a realistic chance of ruling that can potentially make these changes. But, you know, I hope I am surprised. We are supposed to have elections soon, I believe this year. So I can only hope that's the case.
Yeah. Oh, it's so
It's a
sad.
mindset. It's very unfortunate. It is a mindset that has been established in Peru, and I just wish that really there was more awareness about the reality of mining and how it's executed in Peru.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Maxima is just an amazing documentary, full of heart. I think it's Maxima herself, but it's also the way that you present, and that I imagine you had tons of footage, but what made it into the movie is just, it flows beautifully. So
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Florencia.
And now on a personal note here, do you have any upcoming projects? I know that you've done, is Maxima still your only documentary? You've done more features, narrative features,
Yes,
right?
yeah, it is. Yes, I am currently working on actually a narrative project. So I'm hoping to shoot that this summer. I'm super excited about the project. But I have to say, like, I don't think I'll ever leave the documentary space. And I am working on a small short documentary that for another cause that is really dear to my heart. And I think that you know, whenever I probably come across a story like Maxima's, where I feel like, you know, this is a voice that we need to just like tell and show the world. I think I'm definitely gonna do that. I would love to.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Of course.
Yes, and you know, doors are always open at Cine Las Americas to show your films.
Thank
So
you.
hope you keep in touch.
I will. And thank you so much for this initiative. I think it's so important and necessary.
Okay, well, have a good day.
Thank
See
you.
ya.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.